I buried my wife, Eleanor, on a cold Wednesday morning in Denver. My sons Garrett and Colton said they couldn't make it. Urgent business trips, they claimed. That evening, a mysterious note slipped under my door, changed everything. Your children were hiding something at the cemetery today. Meet me at Riverside Cafe tomorrow, at 2 p.m. if you want to know what they really buried with your wife. Come alone. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, unfamiliar. What could my grieving sons possibly be hiding? When I arrived, the photographs I saw left me breathless. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Because what I'm about to reveal will keep you up all night. The November wind cut through my black coat as I stood beside Eleanor's grave, watching them lower my wife of 32 years into the frozen Colorado earth. Riverside Cemetery stretched around me, its bare trees reaching toward a gray Denver sky that mirrored the emptiness in my chest. Only a handful of people had come. Eleanor's book club friends, Mrs. Henderson from next door and Father Ashton from St. Mary's. Their whispered condolences felt hollow against the bitter morning air. What struck me most wasn't who was there, but who wasn't. My sons. Garrett had called Tuesday night, his voice tight with regret. Dad, I'm so sorry. This Seattle deal just exploded. I have to be here for the closing. Colton's excuse came an hour later. Emergency client meeting in Chicago. You know how it is with law firms. As if there would be other funerals, other chances to say goodbye to the woman who'd raised them, loved them, forgiven their every mistake. Father Ashton spoke about Eleanor's kindness, her volunteer work, her famous apple pies at church fundraisers. The words washed over me like rain on stone. All I could think about was the empty space where my boys should have been standing. By 11:30 it was over. The cemetery workers waited respectfully as people drifted away, leaving me alone with my grief and a hole in the ground that seemed to swallow more than just Eleanor's casket. I drove home to our house on Holly Street in silence, past the elementary school where Eleanor had taught for 20 years, past the park where we'd walked every evening until the cancer made walking impossible. The house felt cavernous without her presence. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat in Eleanor's favorite chair, staring at sympathy cards scattered across the dining table. 64 years old, and I'd become one of those men whose children were too busy to show up when it mattered most. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of casseroles from neighbors and phone calls from Eleanor's sisters. I answered mechanically, accepted their kindness, promised to take care of myself. But as evening settled over Denver, the loneliness became unbearable. I was heating up Mrs. Henderson's lasagna when I heard it, a soft whisper of paper sliding under the front door. My heart jumped. Maybe one of the boys had driven back. I hurried to the entryway, but the porch was empty. Only a single sheet of cream-colored paper lay on the hardwood floor, folded once with my name written in elegant script. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Mr. Crawford, I know you're grieving, but there are things about your sons you need to understand. Things about why they really missed Eleanor's funeral. If you want to know what Garrett and Colton were actually doing yesterday while you buried your wife alone, meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Riverside Cafe on Colfax. Come alone. A concerned friend. I read it 3 times, my pulse quickening with each word. Someone had been watching my family. Someone knew something about my son's absence that I didn't. The rational part of my mind whispered warnings about strangers and scams, about grieving widowers being easy targets. But a deeper instinct, the same one that had told me something was wrong when Eleanor started losing weight, too quickly urged me to listen. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I would meet this stranger. The afternoon crowd at Riverside Cafe buzzed with typical Denver energy, but I felt detached, watching it all through glass. Students hunched over laptops. Construction workers grabbed coffee. Elderly couples murmured to each other. Normal people with normal lives. Unaware that what I was about to learn would change everything, I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table where I could watch the door. My hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee while my mind spun. What if this meeting was some cruel trick played on a vulnerable widower? Then she walked in. At exactly 2 o'clock, the woman entered with effortless authority. 70-something silver hair and an elegant chignon, wearing a navy wool coat that signaled money and taste. Her eyes swept the cafe with practiced confidence, and when they landed on me, I knew she was the mysterious correspondent. Mr. Crawford. Her voice held the refined cadence of old Denver society. I'm Rosalind Ashford. Thank you for meeting me. She sat with graceful deliberation, every detail of her presence radiating respectability, which somehow made the situation even more unnerving. I knew Eleanor from the literacy program, she said. A wonderful woman. Her death was unexpected. The doctors said it was the cancer, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, that's what they said. Her smile tightened with meaning. But sometimes doctors don't see everything. Before I could respond, she reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. You should see these first. The photographs she spread across the table made my blood freeze. Garrett and Colton, captured in stark black and white, stood beside Eleanor's freshly filled grave. They weren't mourning, they were working digging with deliberate care while one stood watch. These were taken yesterday afternoon, Rosalind said softly. While you were home grieving, your sons were burying something with their mother. My hands trembled as I stared at the images, Garrett kneeling beside the grave with a small metal box, Colton scanning the cemetery for witnesses. The timestamps showed a methodical, coordinated effort. I don't understand, I whispered. Your boys are in trouble, she said. Serious gambling debts. The kind that gets people hurt. A sick realization formed. Insurance money. $4 million, she said. $2 million each on you and Eleanor. Policies they persuaded you both to increase last year. You recall Garrett's arguments about inflation. I did. He'd been so confident, so reassuring, just looking out for us. Eleanor didn't die from cancer, Mr. Crawford. She was poisoned, slowly in a way that mimicked her condition, and you were supposed to be next. The cafe noise dissolved into static. No, my sons wouldn't. Wouldn't they? She gestured to the photographs. Then explain these. Explain why they lied about being out of town. Explain what they buried with your wife. I stared until the images blurred. My sons. The boys Eleanor and I had loved and raised. That box contains evidence, Rosalind continued. Poison syringes, maybe even their plans for your death. They couldn't keep it and they couldn't destroy it. So they buried it, assuming no one would disturb a fresh grave. My voice barely worked. How do you know all this? I've been watching your family for months, she said. I have my reasons. What matters now is stopping your sons before they finish what they started. She gathered the photos, her gaze piercing. We need to find that box tonight. The drive back to Holly Street passed in a blur of disbelief and mounting dread. Every traffic light, every familiar landmark seemed foreign now, as if Rosalind's revelations had shifted the very foundation of my world. Those photographs burned in my memory. Garrett's focused expression as he knelt beside Eleanor's grave. Colton's nervous glances around the empty cemetery. Back home, I sat in my living room staring at the business card Rosalind had pressed into my hand. Her elegant script had written a phone number on the back, along with 4 words that made my stomach churn. Call me by 8. Could I really believe that my boys had poisoned their mother? That they were planning to kill me next? The rational part of my mind screamed that it was impossible, but the photographs didn't lie. And neither did the cold certainty in Rosalind's voice. I needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that would either confirm this nightmare or put it to rest forever. Which meant I needed Eugene Morris. Eugene had managed Riverside Cemetery for 37 years before retiring last spring. More importantly, he'd been Eleanor's student back when she taught 3rd grade. He'd visited her in the hospital during those final weeks, bringing flowers and stories about his grandchildren. If anyone would help me disturb Eleanor's grave, it would be Eugene. My hands trembled as I dialed his number. Brennon. His gravelly voice carried genuine warmth. How are you holding up, son? Eugene, I need to ask you something and you're going to think I've lost my mind. A pause. Try me. I need to get into the cemetery tonight. Into Eleanor's section. There's something buried near her grave that I have to find. The silence stretched so long, I thought he'd hung up. Finally, this about your boys not showing up yesterday. You noticed? Hard not to. 37 years I've seen every kind of grief there is. But I've also seen guilt. He trailed off. What kind of something are we talking about? I took a deep breath and told him everything. Rosalind's accusations, the photographs, the insurance policies, the possibility that Eleanor had been murdered. Eugene listened without interruption. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, he whispered when I finished. You really think they killed her? I don't know what to think anymore, but I have to find out. Another long pause. Then, what do you need? Relief flooded through me. Keys to the maintenance gate, a couple of shovels, and your word that this stays between us until we know the truth? You got it. Meet me at the north gate at midnight. I'll bring the tools. And Brennon. Bring that woman who showed you the pictures. If she's been watching your family like she claims, she might know exactly where to look. I called Rosalind immediately. She answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting. Mr. Crawford, have you made your decision? Midnight, north gate of Riverside Cemetery. Can you be there? I'll be there. Her voice carried a note of satisfaction that should have warned me, but I was too focused on the task ahead to pay attention. After hanging up, I sat in Eleanor's chair and tried to prepare myself for what we might find. The woman I'd loved for 32 years reduced to evidence in a criminal investigation. The thought of disturbing her rest, of treating her grave like a crime scene, made me physically sick. But if my sons had murdered her, if they were planning to kill me too, then Eleanor would understand. She'd always been practical about justice, about doing what was right, even when it hurt. At midnight, we would desecrate Eleanor's grave. The November air bit through our coats. As we gathered at Eleanor's grave, our breath forming pale clouds in the dark. Eugene had brought battery-powered work lights that cast hard shadows across the fresh headstone. Here, Rosalind whispered, pointing to a spot 3 feet from the stone. In the photographs, they were digging just off to the side. Eugene handed me a spade. Slow and careful. Don't disturb more than necessary. The first cut of metal into earth felt like a violation. Each scoop of dirt echoed through the silent cemetery. Rosalind kept watch, scanning for security patrols. There, Eugene said, after we'd dug about 2 feet down. His spade struck metal with a dull clang. We knelt and brushed away the remaining soil until a small aluminum box emerged 8 inches square, sealed tight. "Open it," Rosalind urged. My hands shook as I unlatched it. The box clicked open, and under Eugene's worklight lay items that froze my blood. Vials of clear liquid labeled in Garrett's handwriting. Digitalis extract, 2 ml doses. Sterile syringes. A notebook filled with dosage calculations and timing charts. And at the bottom, a manila folder whose contents made my heart slam. The first page, Phase 2 BC elimination, written in Colton's lawyer-neat script. A detailed plan for my murder timelines. Methods contingency notes, all designed to look like a grief-induced heart attack. My God, Eugene whispered. The next document hit harder, a handwritten confession supposedly from me describing how I discovered Eleanor's imaginary affair, poisoned her, in jealous rage, and intended to commit suicide from guilt. They were going to frame you, Rosalind said softly. Make it a murder-suicide. Eleanor had never cheated. But who would question the story if I were dead? Beneath that lay loose pages covered in calculations. Phone numbers for bookies and loan sharks. Garrett owed $87,000. Colton owed over $120,000 to a Black Hawk casino. And then the final page, the one that revealed everything, a note in Garrett's handwriting. RA says insurance payout within 30 days if both parents deceased. She handles arrangements. We just follow the plan exactly. RA, I whispered. Someone's been directing them. A mastermind, Rosalind said, studying the note. Someone experienced in insurance fraud. Someone who knows how to make murders look natural. Eugene shook his head. Your own sons, Brennon. Planning to kill you and frame you for Eleanor's murder. I stared at the evidence in the dirt beside my wife's grave. The vials that had ended her life. The plans for my death. The confession meant to destroy her memory. Forever. We need to call the police, Eugene said. Not yet, Rosalind replied firmly. If we move too soon, this RA will vanish, and your sons will claim coercion. We have to catch them in the act. Her certainty steadied me. Even in this nightmare, she was thinking clearly, keeping me from rushing into mistakes. The truth was undeniable. My sons were murderers, guided, controlled, or manipulated by someone hiding behind those 2 initials. Dawn crept through the windows of my Holly Street house, but I hadn't slept. I sat at the kitchen table with the contents of the metal box spread before me like pieces of a nightmare. Every few minutes I picked up one of the vials, rereading Garrett's careful handwriting, hoping the words might somehow change. They never did. The digitalis that had slowly killed my wife, the timeline for my own murder, the forged confession framing Eleanor as an adulteress, and me as her killer. Every detail written in my son's familiar handwriting, as casually as if they were making grocery lists. By 7 a.m., I'd made my decision. I couldn't go to the police, not yet. Rosalind was right. Without catching them in the act, they could claim coercion. Blame everything on the mysterious RA. I needed a confession, preferably recorded, which meant bringing them here to their childhood home and confronting them with the truth. I rehearsed the phone call before dialing Garrett. My hands were steadier than I expected. Dad. His voice carried that professional warmth he used on clients. How are you holding up? Better, son. Listen, I need you and Colton to come over tonight. There are some things about your mother's estate we need to discuss. A pause. Estate matters, Dad. It's only been 2 days since the funeral. Shouldn't you take some time to grieve before dealing with paperwork? His concern sounded so genuine that for a moment I almost doubted what I'd seen in the box. Almost. I know it seems rushed, but the insurance company is already asking questions. And there are decisions about the house, about Mom's things that I can't make alone. I let my voice crack. I just need my boys here. It's too much to handle by myself. Of course, Dad. We'll be there. What time? 7. I'll order dinner from that Italian place your mother liked. Perfect. I'll call Colton. Dad, we love you. We'll get through this together. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, stunned by how easily he lied. We love you. We'll get through this, all while planning my death. Colton called 20 minutes later. Dad, Garrett told me about tonight. I'm sorry I haven't been around since the funeral. This Chicago case has consumed me, but family comes first. Always. I understand, son. Work is work. Not anymore. From now on, you're my priority. We'll take care of you. Mom would have wanted that. Mom would have wanted you not to murder her, I thought. 7 o'clock sharp, I said. We have a lot to discuss. After hanging up, I began preparing. I hid recording devices around the living room, my phone, an old cassette recorder Eleanor once used, even the voice memo app on my tablet. If they confessed, I wanted it captured from multiple angles. I also called Rosalind, explaining the plan. She offered to wait nearby, hidden outside, in case things went wrong. I agreed, though. Something in her voice sounded different, almost excited. As afternoon faded, I arranged the evidence on the coffee table and covered it with a dish towel. When my sons arrived, they'd see their mother's favorite tablecloth, her good china set for dinner, never suspecting what lay beneath. At 6:30, I ordered the Italian food. At 6:45, I set the table for 3. At 6:55, I sat down and waited. They would arrive at 7 unsuspecting. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock, followed by the familiar sound of Garrett's key in the lock. Dad, we're here. His voice carried that cheerful tone I'd heard 1,000 times growing up. They entered together, Garrett in his expensive Seattle business suit, Colton still wearing his lawyer's navy blazer. Both carried white lilies, Eleanor's favorites. The sight of them looking so much like the loving sons I'd raised nearly broke my resolve. How are you holding up, Dad? Colton asked, embracing me with genuine warmth. You look tired. I haven't been sleeping well, I admitted. We sat down to the Italian takeout, and for 20 minutes it felt almost normal. They asked about my appetite, my medication, household repairs. Caring sons checking on their grieving father. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I have to ask you boys something, and I need honest answers. They exchanged a quick glance. Of course, Dad, Garrett said. What's on your mind? Why weren't you really at the funeral? Another glance longer this time. Colton cleared his throat. Dad, we explained this. I had the Chicago emergency. Garrett had his Seattle deal. I know what you told me. I stood up and walked to the coffee table, pulling away the dish towel to reveal the photographs. But these tell a different story. The color drained from both their faces as they stared at the images of themselves, at Eleanor's grave digging, burying something. Dad, where did you get these? Garrett's voice had lost all its warmth. As someone who's been watching our family, want to explain what you were burying with your mother? This is insane, Colton said, standing abruptly. Someone's manipulating you, Dad. These could be photoshopped. Could they fake this too? I pulled out the metal box, setting it between us with a heavy thud. Because I found it, right where these photos showed you putting it. Garrett's professional mask slipped entirely. You dug up Mom's grave. I had help, and I found everything. I opened the box, revealing the vials, syringes, notebooks. The digitalis you used to poison your mother. The timeline for killing me next. Even the fake confession to frame me for Eleanor's murder. Colton sank back into his chair, his face ashen. Dad, you don't understand. I understand that you murdered your mother. The words exploded out of me. I understand that you were planning to kill me too, for insurance money, to pay off your gambling debts. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Garrett whispered, his hands shaking. We never wanted to hurt anyone. But you did hurt someone. You killed her. We had no choice. Colton's voice cracked, tears streaming down his face. The people we owed, they were going to kill us, Dad. Kill our families. We were desperate. So you decided to kill your parents instead. We were told it would be painless, Garrett said, sobbing now. That Mom wouldn't suffer. That you wouldn't suffer. Told by who? I demanded. Who gave you this plan? They looked at each other, terror replacing the guilt in their eyes. "We can't," Colton whispered. "She'll destroy us. She'll destroy everyone we love. She already has. She turned you into murderers." "We had no choice," Garrett cried out. "She made us do it." The slow, deliberate sound of applause cut through our family's anguish like a blade. We all froze heads, turning toward the living room doorway where the clapping continued steady and mocking. Rosalind Ashford stepped into the light, her elegant hands coming together in measured approval. Gone was the concerned friend from the cafe, the helpful ally from the cemetery. In her place stood someone I didn't recognize, someone whose smile held decades of carefully cultivated hatred. "Bravo," she said, her refined voice dripping with satisfaction. "What a touching family reunion. Father confronts sons, sons confess their sins, everyone cries. It's like a television drama, really." Garrett and Colton shrank back in their chairs, terror replacing the guilt in their eyes. "Mrs. Ashford," Colton whispered, "you said you'd stay away. You promised—" "I promised many things, dear boy, but plans change." She moved into the room with predatory grace, her gaze fixed on me. "Hello, Brennon. Surprised to see me. You're her—" I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "You're the one who made them do this. Made them—" She laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Oh, I prefer to think I gave them an opportunity. Your sons were already drowning in debt, already desperate. I simply offered them a solution. You turned them into murderers. I turned them into instruments of justice." Her voice hardened, losing all pretense of civility. "Justice that's been 40 years in the making." She pulled a photograph from her coat pocket, old faded, showing a man in his 50s, with kind eyes and graying temples. "Do you recognize him, Brennon?" "You should. You killed him." I stared at the image, confusion mixing with growing dread. "I don't know who that is." "Reginald Ashford, my husband, your business partner, the man whose life you destroyed when you bankrupted Crawford Ashford Construction." The name hit me like a physical blow. Reginald. I hadn't thought about him in decades, but suddenly the memories came flooding back. The partnership that had failed in the early 80s. The recession that had killed so many small businesses. "Reginald took his own life," I whispered. "The business failed, but that wasn't anyone's fault. The economy." "The economy." Her voice rose to a near shriek. "You embezzled from our joint accounts. You used our company funds to save your precious house, while my husband lost everything." "That's not true. I never—" 40 years I've waited," she continued, ignoring my protests. 40 years I've watched you build your perfect little life while my husband rotted in the ground. And finally I found the perfect way to destroy it all." She gestured toward my sons. "It was so easy, really. A few gambling debts here, some bad investment advice there. Once they were desperate enough, I offered them a way out. Kill their parents, collect the insurance, pay off their debts." "Except we'd be dead," I said. "That was rather the point." Her smile was arctic. "But then I realized something. Killing you quickly would be too merciful. I wanted you to suffer first. I wanted you to know that your own children had betrayed you." She reached into her coat again, and this time her hand emerged, holding a silver letter opener, its blade catching the lamplight. "But I've changed my mind again. Why settle for just your death, when I can have so much more?" Garrett tried to stand, but she turned the blade toward him. "Sit down, boy. You've played your part beautifully." "Mrs. Ashford, please," Colton begged. "You said if we did this, our families would be safe." "Your families will be safe," she replied pleasantly, "because they'll never have to live with the shame of what you've done. Tonight, it ends for all of you. A tragic murder-suicide." She raised the blade, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Tonight, you all die together." "Wait." I raised my hands, stepping between Rosalind and my sons. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Before you do something you can't take back, let me show you something." She paused, the letter opener gleaming in her grip. "Nothing you can say will change what you did to my husband." "What if I can prove I didn't do what you think I did?" "Prove it." She laughed bitterly. "I lived through it, Brennon. I watched Reginald come home every night, broken a little more each day." I moved slowly toward the bookshelf where Eleanor had always kept our important papers. "May I—" "There's something I need to show you." She nodded curtly, the blade still raised. From behind Eleanor's teaching manuals, I pulled out a manila folder I hadn't touched in decades. Inside were documents from the Crawford Ashford days. Records Eleanor had insisted we keep. "These are the financial records from our partnership," I said, spreading papers across the coffee table. Bank statements, loan applications, transfer receipts. Everything from 1982 to 1984. Rosalind's eyes narrowed. What am I supposed to be seeing? That's this. I pointed to a series of bank transfers. I didn't embezzle from our joint accounts, Rosalind. I put money into them. $37,000 from my personal savings. Everything Eleanor and I had. Her hand trembled as she leaned closer to read the records. And this? I continued, pulling out another document. A second mortgage on our house. I used our home as collateral to get an emergency loan for the business. $60,000 that went straight into Crawford Ashford accounts. But Reginald said Reginald was sick, Rosalind, clinically depressed. He'd been struggling with it for months before the business failed. The way he'd disappear for days. The drinking, the paranoid accusations. I saw recognition flicker in her eyes, followed by denial. He wasn't paranoid. Look at the dates. Look at the amounts. I put nearly $100,000 of my own money into trying to save our partnership. I lost our house, Rosalind. Eleanor and I had to move into a rental apartment for 3 years. She stared at the papers, her breathing becoming rapid. The recession killed us, not betrayal. We lost contracts because the city ran out of funding because developers went bankrupt. We lost everything because the economy collapsed. No, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Reginald took his own life because he was sick, not because I betrayed him. I tried to save him, Rosalind. I tried to save our business, our friendship, everything we'd built together. The letter opener clattered to the floor as her hands went to her face. Oh God, what have I done? Garrett and Colton remained frozen, watching their would-be killer crumble. I've destroyed everything, Rosalind sobbed. I turned those boys into murderers. I killed Eleanor. I ruined innocent lives because I was too proud to admit that my husband was sick. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. 40 years of revenge, all based on a lie. The sound of heavy footsteps on the front porch broke through Rosalind's sobs. Before any of us could react, the door opened, and Detective Raymond Foster stepped inside his badge, clearly visible, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Denver Police. He announced, his eyes taking in the scene. The overturned evidence, the letter opener on the floor. Rosalind collapsed in her chair, my sons frozen in terror. Eugene Morris called us about an hour ago, said there might be trouble here tonight. Eugene. Even in my darkest hour, he'd been watching out for me. Detective Foster, I said, finding my voice. I'm Brennon Crawford. This woman is Rosalind Ashford. She's just confessed to orchestrating my wife's murder and manipulating my sons into committing it. Foster's gaze moved to the evidence scattered across my coffee table. The vials of digitalis, the handwritten murder plans, the forged confession. And these gentlemen, my sons Garrett and Colton, they poisoned their mother under Mrs. Ashford's coercion. We didn't want to do it, Colton said, his voice barely audible. She threatened our families. Said people would die if we didn't follow her plan. Foster nodded to his officers, who moved to handcuff both my sons. Garrett Crawford. Colton Crawford, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and the death of Eleanor Crawford. As they read my boys their rights. Foster turned to Rosalind, who had stopped crying and sat staring at the financial documents that had revealed her 40-year mistake. Rosalind Ashford, you're under arrest for murder in the first-degree conspiracy and extortion. I did it all, she said quietly, offering no resistance as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The boys were just tools. I manipulated them, threatened them, turned them into killers. If you're looking for justice, detective, it starts and ends with me. As they led her toward the door, she looked back at me one final time. I'm sorry, Brennan. I'm sorry for everything. Your wife was innocent. Your sons were innocent. You were innocent. And I destroyed it all because I couldn't accept that sometimes good people just break. The house fell silent after they left, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my family. I sat in Eleanor's favorite chair, surrounded by the evidence of how hatred could poison everything it touched, and tried to make sense of what remained. My sons would face trial, but Foster had assured me that their cooperation and the evidence of coercion would likely result in reduced sentences. They would pay for their crimes, but they might also have a chance to rebuild their lives afterward. Rosalind would spend whatever years she had left in prison, finally facing the consequences of letting grief and anger consume 4 decades of her life. And me, I was 64 years old, a widower, whose family had been shattered by secrets and lies. I could choose to let bitterness define my remaining years, to become another Rosalind Ashford nursing grievances until they poisoned everything around me. Or I could choose something else. Eleanor used to say that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the inexcusable. It was about refusing to let other people's choices destroy your own peace. She'd been right about so many things, and she was right about this too. My sons had made terrible choices, but they were still my sons. Rosalind had caused unimaginable pain, but she was also a woman who'd spent 40 years torturing herself with a lie. None of us are beyond redemption if we're willing to face the truth and do the work of healing. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it would be honest. And after everything we'd been through, honesty felt like the most precious gift I could give to Eleanor's memory. Looking back at everything that happened, I realized this isn't just another one of those grandpa stories you hear at family gatherings. This is a true story about how quickly love can turn to betrayal when desperation takes hold. If there's anything I've learned from losing Eleanor and nearly losing my sons, it's this: don't let pride blind you to the truth. Don't assume you know someone's heart just because you've known them for years. And most importantly, don't let anger consume decades of your life like Rosalind did. God gave us the capacity to forgive, not because others deserve it, but because we deserve peace. When I think about those grandpa stories my own father used to tell about forgiveness and second chances, I understand now why God puts these tests in our path. They teach us that mercy is stronger than revenge. This true story taught me that even in our darkest moments, God offers us a choice. We can become prisoners of our pain, or we can choose healing. Rosalind chose 40 years of hatred. My sons chose desperation over honesty, but we all have the power to choose differently. The elderly aren't just repositories of old grandpa stories. We're living proof that it's never too late to learn to grow to forgive. Don't make my family's mistakes. Choose truth over secrets, forgiveness over revenge, and love over fear. What choice will you make when life tests your heart? Share your thoughts. Below, hit that subscribe button if this story moved you. And remember, your story isn't over yet. There's still time to write a better ending.